Um, our final speaker this afternoon is R. Howard Bloch, who will report on the rebuilding of Notre-Dame Cathedral. R. Howard Bloch is the Sterling Professor of French and chair of the Humanities program at Yale University. Before joining the faculty at Yale, Dr. Bloch attended Amherst College and Stanford University, and he's taught at the State University of New York at Buffalo and the University of California, Berkeley, and also at Columbia. He's written numerous books and articles on a variety of topics in and around medieval literature and social history, legal, economic, familial, and political institutions, humor and the fabliaux, gender and the rise of Western Romantic love, and the history of the discipline of medieval studies. His forthcoming book is called Paris and Her Cathedrals. Among his many other honors, Professor Bloch was elected to the American Philosophical Society in 2010. Professor Bloch, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Let me go to the share screen now. I'm of an age in which I have to say these things out loud. Let's see now. Screen two. Screen two, I still have you, Bob, on my screen rather than my PowerPoint. Let's see. I wonder how I can fix that. Okay.
Change the view in the upper right-hand corner to speaker view, and then share the screen with your PowerPoint.
Okay, but now it's still, the PowerPoint is still not coming up there. Let me, okay, can you screen, you're still on my screen, Bob, rather than the, let me see if I can reduce you and put the PowerPoint.
Yeah, you want to hit the share screen button at the bottom.
Okay, the share screen at the bottom, okay. And where do I go from there? I go, can you see it now, the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So let me start from the beginning here. Okay. Now the images of Notre Dame on fire were truly horrific. Like the Acropolis, the Parthenon, or the Taj Mahal, the Cathedral of Paris is one of those places of memory that we thought we could count on always being there. The news reports on the night of April 15th, 2019 were apocalyptic. France had lost its identity as a nation. The soul of France had met its end. A prime symbol of Catholicism in Europe, even of the West, had gone up in smoke on the Ile de la Cité. Now this is a lot of presentish posh. Cathedrals burned all the time in the Middle Ages, and those that are still standing today are the products of centuries of fires. Chartres burned in 962, again in 1020, in 1119, 1134, and again on June 10th, 1194, after which the current building was begun. We have a marvelous record of the fire of 1194 by a canon of Chartres by the name of Jean Le Marchand, who wrote miracle stories in Old French that were reworkings from the Latin. And they are, his description of the fire of 1194 is uncannily like the description of the recent Notre-Dame fire. In the year 1194, in the month of September, at night, a great fire broke out in Chartres, in the city itself. The damage was astonishing. Neither vault nor other building were left standing. Beams and posts collapsed. In the heat of the fire, the lead of roofs all melted. Walls and ramparts went crashing. Belfries and glass went flying. All was turned to perdition, either by fire or by collapse. Now, not all destruction in cathedrals is caused by fire. Nature has not always been kind to cathedrals. A lightning strike in 1837 and tornadoes in the 1840s destabilized the north spire of the first Gothic structure, Saint-Denis. And the spire, you can see here the north spire, was dismantled in 1846. Violence in the wake of the French Revolution took its toll. Enthusiastic revolutionaries during the Reign of Terror pillaged the crypt of Saint-Denis. Revolutionary hammers destroyed or damaged whatever sculpture they could reach, especially in the Parisian region. The dislodging of giant figures in Notre-Dame's Gallery of Kings, which runs across the sort of mid-level horizontally of the cathedral, resulted between the Reign of Terror and the third quarter of the 19th century in what was known as the Toothless Notre-Dame. Then there is the destruction caused by war. German bombs scored over 200 direct hits on Reims Cathedral in World War I. And on September 19, 1914, a bomb ignited scaffolding around the north tower of the west facade and set the whole roof on fire, leaving the upper side of the vaults exposed, much like the current condition of Notre Dame. Reims was rebuilt between 1918 and 1938 in a fashion not unlike that what it will take to rebuild Paris. Now, the cause of the Notre Dame fire is still unknown. Though originally attributed to either a short circuit in the electrified bells system or in the elevators carrying workers conducting renovations at the time, or another possible cause was negligence in the form of a discarded cigarette butt. All we know is that the elaborate fire alarm system, which took 6 years to install, did not work to identify early on the location of the blaze. The damage may have been compounded by human error. When the priest conducting 6 o'clock mass smelled smoke, he sent the organist to investigate. The man monitoring the alarm system was inexperienced and fatigued. He had only been on the job 3 days, and the relief person failed to show up that day, resulting in a double shift. Here is a cross-section in yellow of what burned. And as you can see, it is the area above the top of the ceiling vaults known as the forest, the wooden structure, roof structure, resting on thick tie beams above the upper side of the vault. And you can see the vaults, the top of the vaults here, which looked like sort of giant whales below this forest or roof structure. As a result of the delay in locating the original source of smoke, fire raged unchecked for half an hour in the spire and forest. The fire department was not alerted during this interval or until 6:18 p.m. The blaze was declared under control around midnight. There was relief that the vertical walls of the cathedral had not collapsed. As we can see in this diagram of the great restorer of cathedrals in the 19th century, Viollet-le-Duc's plotting of the physical vectors of force on the great high walls, the roof structure doesn't just hold up the roof, but acts as a brace, as you can see here, to stabilize the lateral thrust of the high vaults, which push outward in this way, and the flying buttresses, which have an inward force to offset that of the lateral thrust of the vault. There was a great worry that the cathedral high walls would collapse once that this stabilizing of the roof structure was no longer there. Now, almost immediately, President of the Republic, Emmanuel Macron, announced that Notre-Dame would be rebuilt within 5 years, and that there would be an international architectural competition. The question of financing was pressing, of course, as the resolutely secular French Republican state has historically had an uneasy relationship to church property, controlled in this instance by the Archbishop and the Diocese of Paris. Within 2 days, however, the National Assembly began to debate a law of exception for rebuilding in order to meet the 5-year deadline, which was imposed by the 2024 Summer Olympic Games set to take place in Paris. The proposed law included creation of a new governmental unit to supervise rebuilding, special tax deductions for contributions, and a relaxing of rules governing environmental impact. Macron's announcement that Notre-Dame would be rebuilt provoked pledges by wealthy individuals, companies, and institutions of almost €1 billion. François Pinault, CEO of the Paris group Kering, which owns Gucci and Yves Saint Laurent, pledged 100 million euros. Bernard Arnault of LVMH, 200 million. L'Oréal, another 200 million, along with energy company Total of 100 million euros. You will recognize here the great multinationals of the luxury industry, which have a tradition of donation for restoration of public monuments in Italy and France. Naturally, pledges of this magnitude elicited an immediate reaction on the French left, and especially among the Gilets jaunes movement, yellow vests, demonstrators in urban revolt, who even before the fire had begun occupying the streets of Paris. Their argument that such sums should be not spent on churches but on the poor harks all the way back to that of Saint Bernard, who in the middle of the 12th century noted forcefully, "O vanity of vanities, but above all insanity, the walls of the church are ablaze with light and color, while the poor of the church go hungry. The church revets its stones in gold and leaves its children naked. The money for feeding the destitute goes to feast the eyes of the rich." Now, Macron's announcement of rebuilding set off another controversy when he specified that he was not opposed to a contemporary architectural gesture. Such a phrase evoked the last half century of French great public building projects, what are known as les grands travaux, which were the occasions of extraordinary national debate around the Centre Pompidou or Beaubourg in 1977, IMP's pyramid entrance to the Louvre in 1988, the Grande Arche de la Défense in 1989, and especially the Très Grande Bibliothèque de France, 1996. Then there is the challenge of Gaudi's Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, which sets a high bar for postmodern hodgepodge kitsch. Now, Macron's announcement elicited a plethora of proposals for Notre-Dame, for a Notre-Dame with a roof garden on the top, for a Notre-Dame with a greenhouse on top, with a sanctuary for animals and insects threatened in cities, a proposal for a glass roof with a high-tech design, as you can see here, a stained glass roof that would radiate stained glass from inside the cathedral. There was one proposal for a light beam that would go up top, for a spaceship on top of Notre-Dame, for a flame, which would look like this. And then there was Vincent Calgo's proposal for a roof structure named by the name of palingenesis, along the lines of the phoenix, Greek for rebirth. Some of these may be more acceptable than others, but there have also been a few absurdist proposals for a rooftop parking garage, as you can see, to help the parking problem in the center of Paris, for a public swimming pool, which would facilitate full immersion baptisms, and for a spire with a wind turbine, which brings the Franco-French debate about wind turbines in the countryside to the heart of Paris. Now, there's been some public discussion of the reconstruction of Notre-Dame, but that conversation reached closure last summer when the proposal was announced to restore the cathedral to its last complete, coherent, and known state, as per the 1964 Venice Charter, which means the original roof framing with a lead roof along the lines of Viollet-le-Duc's spire, which was completed in 1864. The late medieval oak roof frame, after all, lasted for 8 centuries, and the verdict is still out on the iron roof scaffolding installed at Chartres in the 1830s. This is the inside of Chartres as it looks now. And it was partially replaced by steel in the 1990s. or the modular reinforced concrete beams that we find held in place by wooden pegs at Reims after World War I. Now, lead is a toxic substance when buildings burn, but its aesthetic quality and durability, longer than zinc or copper, plus its plasticity and handling, have made it the choice for domes in Paris's Invalides and Pantheon, as well as the restored spire of the Sainte-Chapelle. Restoration of the interior high vaults, in what the French call à l'identique, will be supported by digital technologies in the wake of scans made by the late Andrew Tallon in 2015, with a special Leica 3D laser camera with visualizations for 1 billion points of data, accurate to within 5 millimeters. Now, once the fire had been contained, a tarp to prevent rain damage was extended. Let's see here, what do we have here? Yeah, so here is Notre-Dame inside, as you can see. Once the fire had been contained, immediate order of business included assessment of the damage and securing of the structure. A tarp to prevent rain damage was extended across the breadth of the choir and the nave within 5 days of the fire. North, south, and west gables were braced to protect 3 large rose windows. A frame was built between the walls of the vertical towers. Just a second, I'm having trouble here with my lost here. Where am I? Am I sharing screen with you? Okay. Can you hear me? Once the fire had been contained, the immediate orders of business include assessment of the damage and the securing of the structure. Am I sharing the screen? Okay. Could somebody let me know?
Yes, we can see it just fine.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, so.
But you're still showing the interior of the cathedral. Was there something?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let me go back to my my talk here. Yeah. Okay. Once the fire had been contained, the immediate order of business included assessment of the damage and securing of the structure. A tarp to prevent rain damage was extended across the breadth of the choir and the nave within 5 days of the fire. Let me get to that. How do I, let's see, get away from this of the fire, as you can see here. And a tarp to prevent rain damage was extended across the breadth of the choir and nave within 5 days of the fire. North, south, and west gables were braced to protect large rose windows. A frame was built between the tall vertical walls of the church, and the flying buttresses were reinforced by form-fitted wooden moles. Gargoyles and other vulnerable pieces of sculpture were wrapped in plaster and removed to protect them from further damage. Ceiling stones were capped. Ceiling stones were capped and plaster to prevent their falling. Then came the major task of removing molten lead and lead dust, 210 tons of it, which fell not only on top of the vaults and floor, but lodged in 8,000 organ pipes, which had to be dismantled. An American company using German laser technology, Laser Clean, tested on the dome of the Jefferson Memorial in DC, assisted in cleaning the interior. Lead dust, which polluted the surrounding neighborhood, also had to be cleaned. Now, this preliminary phase of cleanup and safety took a little over a year. which opened the way to the incredible, here's some of the lead which fell in the cathedral, which opened the way to the incredibly delicate and time-consuming job of disassembling the twisted and molten steel scaffolding in place due to ongoing roof renovation at the time of the fire. Here is what the, excuse me, I have to go back here. Well, here's what the 40,000 rods and connectors weighing 200 tons looked like from inside the empty space. Let me go back, see if I can go back in the presentation. I don't seem to be able to go back. This is what the twisted molten steel and scaffolding looked like during the ongoing renovation at the time of the fire. And here's what 40,000 rods and connectors weighing 200 tons looked like from inside the empty space once filled with spire and roof. The slightest misstep would have menaced workers, the exposed vaults, and still standing masonry of the cathedral walls. So a secondary structure of metal beams was built on 3 levels to stabilize the burned out struts. The structure was framed by an enclosing superstructure from which metal beams and rope access to workers was provided. And these workers propelled themselves into the exposed superstructure via metal beams. And they went right down into the heart of the burned scaffolding, removing it piece by piece. This second preparatory phase was completed in November 2020 at a cost overrun of 100 million euros because of the unforeseen extra expense of lead removal and shutdowns due to COVID. Meanwhile, specialists have been busy in workshops and laboratories with 2 things in mind: to assess and repair damage and to mine damaged components of the cathedral for what they may teach us about its history. And this relates to the kind of thing that Michael McCormick was talking about yesterday when he in his presentation. Though some of the lead of the stained glass windows may have melted or been bent out of shape, early assessments are positive on the whole. Stones which fell from the vaults or still in intact walls are in the process of being examined for calcification caused by heat. Dendrochronological studies of pieces of the roof beams still intact are a source of information about the original building of Notre-Dame, as are samples of metal, mortar, and paint. Since the completion of the preparatory phase of rebuilding, 1,000 trees have been selected and harvested from the national forests all over France and hauled off to dry for 12 to 18 months. Offers of logs from foreign companies have been declined. Much of the money has been secured from 340,000 donors all over the world. Now, what can we learn from the loss of the roof of Notre-Dame? First, a few no-brainers about fire safety, that a detection system can be overly complicated, that any system is only as good as the people manning it, who should be well-trained and well-rested. And if you have to smoke around 800-year-old timbers, make sure to extinguish your butts. Second, Notre-Dame is still a working cathedral. And you can see here priests in hard hats celebrating Mass only 2 months after the fire and before the full extent of lead pollution had been taken into account. A Christmas mini concert was held in one of the chapels only 2 months ago. And here you're going to see some angels in hard hats. Okay, we'll stop it there. It's almost too much fun for one day. Now, from the restoration of Notre-Dame, we learn much about the ways cathedrals were originally built. The tools and materials may be very different in the manual, mechanical, and now digital ages. But for now, we catch a glimpse of some very basic building techniques that have been around since the High Middle Ages. Consider this 14th century manuscript of the building of the Tower of Babel, compared to the scaffolding already in place on the roof of Notre-Dame at the time of the fire. The wooden half-hangers that we see under vulnerable flying buttresses reproduced the technique of constructing flyers in the 13th century, when they held stones in place until the mortar between them had dried. I just want to suggest in closing that the repair of the roof structure of Notre-Dame be treated as a learning opportunity. The public should be allowed to witness the reconstruction on the model of what is being done in the Rijksmuseum for the restoration of Rembrandt's The Night Watch, which is not only open to the public, but is visible live online. Or what is underway currently in the restoration of the Ghent altarpiece, also visible behind glass. The restoration of Notre-Dame should be accessible to the public. And yes, why not diffused, both inside and outside and from multiple points of view, in real time and online? One might imagine the creative use of drones to witness building from above, thus enabling us to see things intended originally only for the eyes of God. Already those who build the roof are building the roof frame have demonstrated their craft inherited from the Middle Ages on the parvis in front of the cathedral. Watching Notre-Dame put back together should be an emotional experience with the redeeming effect of healing the national trauma of April 15th, 2019. Thank you.
Thanks for that fascinating talk. So the first question that we have here is sort of obvious, but what is your best guess about the year the work will be complete? And what will be, and I'll add to that, this is from Richard Schifrin, and I'll add to that, what do you think the cost overrun is going to be?
Well, the cost overrun for the first phase was already $100 million because of several pauses due to COVID, and because of the discovery of the lead dust and poisoning. 8,000 organ pipes had to be removed and cleaned. The neighborhood had to be, in a sense, cleaned as best could be from lead dust, and that just wasn't anticipated. Now, lead is a very popular material for the building of roofs in Paris, especially in public monuments. And they announced that they were rebuilding it just as it was before. So there's already been a cost overrun of 100 million euros. And my guess is that the original estimate was, and collection of funds and pledges was 820 million euros. I think it'll be more like, $1 billion euros, but who knows? And I think the timing will be, the reason they decided to build it back as it was before and not accept any of these sort of futuristic designs is that they have to meet this deadline of 2024 when the Summer Olympics are set for Paris.
I see. So Caroline Bruzelius thanks you and asks if you could share with this audience some of the exciting discoveries of the research groups, and pardon my mispronunciation, Scientifique au Service de la Restauration de Notre-Dame.
Yeah, well, a lot of the work, some of the timbers in the roof didn't burn, so they have information using dendrochronology to assess exactly when these timbers were cut. So they learned something about the sequence of the building of the cathedral. There also, have been scientific studies with magnetic resonance of the stones and actual analysis of the fossils caught in the stones to know exactly where the stones that with which Notre Dame was built came from, and they. A lot of the scientific information hasn't really been released. I haven't seen the information. I don't know whether that's full enough answer for Carolyn. Hi, Carolyn.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Bloch. And I think that we're going to call the meeting to a close now. I look forward to seeing you all again, even if it's virtual again, at our next meeting in mid-November. And please remember to check the Society's website, www.amphilsoc.org, for news of members and also of our many public offerings. Thank you all so much for joining us.